Takuma Bonsai, a founder member of ACDA, and I've been with the organization the last 28 years, and I have functioned on various committees of the organization, but more importantly, for many years on the steering committee of ACDA.
Brother Takuma, good afternoon to you. I know you've been a long-standing member of ACDA. What I would like to ask you is, what prompted you to, and persons like yourself, to gather to form the organization? What was the central idea behind the formation of it?
Okay, the formation of organizations never happened in a vacuum. It is a continuation of a historical process. African people in Guyana has always been struggling to build organizations. And we have built many organizations along the road. And just to fast forward, we had the League of Colored People, we had ASCRI, and then we ended up with ACDA. And I would say that, speaking for myself, from persons like me, it is the desire to continue that historical march that our ancestors started many centuries ago, to form organizations that will help to rekindle their African consciousness and to bring a rebirth of the African culture, the African person, the African nation in Guyana. And as a member of ASCRI, I was active in the cultural struggles of our people. And then at a certain point in time, in the mid-70s, ASCRI, went out of formation, and there was a vacuum created in the African Guyanese community. And there was a lot of pressure coming from various sections of our community for us to build an organization similar to ASCRI that could represent African interests and promote African culture, and to continue that historical march. And I think it is that desire that, at least from speaking for myself, that propelled me when Sister Violet and others, came to Guyana, and we discussed, the possibilities. It is that pushed me, to recognize that this is a historical moment for the rebirth of another African organization that could do as ACDA was doing, and even do better than ACDA, learning from, better than ASCRI, learning from some of the, mistakes or pitfalls of ASCRI. And I think that generally, that is what really inspires a lot of us towards trying to establish a new organization. And in this particular case, we attach very consciously a kind of conscious economic commitment. So the organization is not just cultural in the sense of singing, dancing, and music, and promoting African names and African ceremonies, but the organization will also consciously seek to influence the economic empowerment of our people. And we have learned that we have to define culture in a more holistic way, so that culture didn't mean for us in ACDA simply singing and dancing. Culture represents the totality of the African experience. And in that case, politics and developing an African sense of politics became an important feature in the architecture of ACDA.
Do you think it's important to African Guyanese to have an African organization, like ACDA or any other? You think, what's the importance you see to the African Guyanese collective? Is it important that we have an African organization?
Okay,
Guyana?
I will answer it on two levels. I think it is important in a multi-ethnic society that all ethnic groups seek to reclaim, their culture and seek to promote their interests. And in that sense, it is very important that Africans build African organizations, because when you look at the historical process, because we were enslaved, Indians and others came as indenture. They were able to hold on to a lot of their culture, but the enslavement project stripped Africans of all their cultural identity. And it is even more important for us than even other ethnicities in Guyana to reclaim African culture. So African organizations are important, okay, in the reinventing of ourselves and our own personality. And because Guyana is a multi-ethnic society where, people have organizations, that Indians have many organizations, the Chinese have their organizations, persons of different ethnicity has organizations that promote their interests. It is only logical that Africans, as a major ethnic community in Guyana, develop African organizations to develop African interests. You see, because while you have organizations looking after national interests, very often the ethnic communal interests get lost in the national interests. And you need organizations in the ethnic community to keep defining and redefining what is the community interest at each and every historical moment.
We're in the Emancipation season. And after 1993, as soon as almost a year after it came into existence, established Emancipation and the Emancipation Festival. What are your views? What do you view emancipation? What emancipation means to you?
Well, emancipation means to me the rebirth of the African personality in its totality. Because as I said before, the enslavement process stripped us of our cultural identity. In fact, we were reduced to chattel. We were treated as though we were some cattle. We're people without a history, without a purpose, only to work for the enrichment of the slave master. So emancipation represents that prolonged struggle of our ancestors, not only to crush slavery, but in the process of crushing slavery, rebuild the African personality and the African culture, and to speak to the world, not as slaves or enslaved people, but in the African personality. And I think that emancipation is important in that very fundamental way, okay? Because if we fail to do that, or if we fail to recognize that, then we would allow ourselves consciously to be willing victims of the colonial and the enslavement process. So emancipation is not a moment. Emancipation is a process. And at each and every point in our experience, we have to reevaluate, reassess, and to give new and purposeful meaning to emancipation. So emancipation is not simply a celebration that we were finally able to crush and bring an end to the enslavement process, but it is a conscious commitment that the rebirth of the African personality and African interest is a continual struggle, okay? And it's a process and not an event.
Do you have any memories you want to share about the early days of ACDA?
One of the things that, now that we're in this compound, we have two beautiful buildings, a lot of space, a lot of assets. But when we first started, we were at Sister Violet's home. She provided space for us at the bottom of our house downstairs. Very small room, but that is where we started. And what I always remember, in that experience is that even though we had a little space, okay, the members who came to ACDA and who undertook to build the organization, the spirit is something that always stuck with me. Okay, we were comrades who were genuinely committed to the purpose. We didn't have a lot of grandeur. Okay, it was a hard struggle with almost nothing, but the human commitment to build something. And today, 28 years after we're in this compound, you know, those early days, you know, strikes me in a very profound way. And I think another aspect of it that was very interesting is that, remember, we built ACDA in those days around discussions of videos produced by the late Dr. Ben, okay, C.L.R. James, you know, and a lot of the African personalities, both in the Caribbean and the wider African diaspora, who have been seriously studying the African condition in the world. And I remember that our exposure to those discourse played a major role in cementing the unity, okay, and giving direction and purpose to the original followers of ACDA. Persons never used to want to miss attending a meeting, because to miss attending the meeting is to miss seeing one of those interesting videos. And you know, that period really stuck in my mind, you know.
Do you have any memories of the first Emancipation that was held in the National Park?
Memories that really stick and continue to be profound is our struggles to pull the Emancipation Festival off. It was the times where we had to be building our tents and our platforms, you know, the day or two before the festival. You know, we had a card of committed comrades who will work beyond the call of duty to make sure that at the end of the day, when Emancipation morning comes, that ACDA is ready and prepared. And I think it is those struggles and those sacrifices, you know, that for me is very important, because it is the genesis, okay, of the organization. And whatever we are today is a result of those struggles and those sacrifices.
ACDA have many committees. ACDA is really run by committees, different committees. What committee you find that you are most interested in and you find that you could do most work in? The committee that you say that, yes, that's the one that I can do more contributions to. And maybe have Sister Marshall here, she's into culture.
Well, I'm very political, and I've always, you know, have a strong conviction that if ACDA is to make a profound mark in the African society beyond the simple cultural things, that ACDA has to find a way of injecting itself into the African community politics, and to develop the capacity to make a claim, okay, on the right to defend and to represent African interests at the highest levels of the country. And that has always been what have been driving me. We have had some amount of success. Okay, it's a project in the main. I think we have had an important impact on African politics when we were able to push the African Party, the PNC, closer to considering the whole question of shared governance. When we were able to insist that ACDA be respected as an independent voice that has the right, like any political party, to articulate the political interests of African people the way we see it, And I think that we forced that acceptance. And I think that today, nobody questions ACDA's engagement in the political situation when we choose to. Because I think we have won that battle, that we define African culture in a way that is holistic, and nobody could really seriously criticize us for that. And we have won the right, okay, not simply to be treated as a simple cultural organization with singing and dancing, but as a serious organization that is serious about the political empowerment and economical empowerment of African people. And we want a political and economic system that allows us to make a claim on that empowerment.
Thank you very much, brother.
My name is Barrington Braffett. I'm a writer, an artist, and a founder member of ACDA. I've served in various capacities in the organization, and I've been on the steering committee, and I've created imagery that was necessary for the mandate of ACDA, and designed imagery also. Illustrations, in fact.
Brother Barry, you've been a long member of ACDA from the very, very beginning. Therefore, I want to ask you, what made you come together to form the organization? What was the idea behind it? And what motivated you to be a part of the formation?
Well, I evolved as a youngster in the arts and a writer, and I lived also in South Georgetown, which is areas from Hatfield Street to La Penitence. And I recognized that there was a consensus of defining African people in the context of a colonial heritage of deformations, of constructed fictions that were leveled against the African existence. Also in the churches that there was also, every painting you saw had pictures that there were no Africans there. My father, who I didn't grow with, but I visited, told me, "Why you go to church?" I said, "But you got to go to church." He said, "You know, every nation, call the names of 4 peoples or 4 nations or 4 kingdoms, 4 prominent kingdoms mentioned in the Bible." And I immediately said Egypt, Ethiopia, Elam, and Punt. I said, and he smiled. He said, "You're a bright boy." He said, "Where those nations exist?" And that was a stopper. He said, "They're in Africa. All of them in Africa. All of them is black people. Show me any pamphlet that the church hand out that show you those people." And I stopped going to church. And I did anthropology, and I recognized that we in Guyana, because I centered my focus on Guyana, had some serious problems of fragmentation. The society was fragmented. And I learned, because I started reading. A friend brought a book for me called Myth of African Civilization by Chikante Diop. It took me 3 years to read the book. There was nothing, I couldn't get the geography right. Some of the places he was talking about in that book I didn't know exist. And I started questioning why was that so. There was nothing I learned in school that defined that.
So that prompted you to get into ACDA?
That prompted me to do. When I came into ACDA, I brought the resources And I said, ACDA wasn't created, ACDA was compelled into being because of the reality that we were existing in. And I want to give an example that we can empathize with a newspaperman that I approached to get 2 of my illustrated work, the storytelling work, into his papers. One was The Shadow of the Jaguar, and the other was The Mighty Economy. Both of them were published subsequently. And he said, none of that is going into my paper. And to my memory, he approached ACDA and said, we want to do an illustrated story of a black woman whose husband left she and she's selling on the pave. And ACDA responded, if you do that, we will picket you, because that is not so. And it isn't so. Most of the women on the pave, their husbands just pick them up in the evening with a taxi, or it's what they do. And it's what we have been doing, because my late brother went to Libya and he came back and told me, he said, you know, I met an African, and he said, I can tell you where the tribes are. There are women who tie their head and like to sell. He said they're from Doheny. And then he started telling him our actions. And he was pinning it on different tribal groups. So ACDA was not created out of fiction. ACDA was compelled to exist because it had to exist. It had to do what it had to do. Because we are cornered. We are still cornered by a lot of mythology.
Do you think it's important to African Ghanaians?
It's important.
ACDA is important.
I think ACDA is important. They might not acknowledge ACDA, the name, but the work we have done has empowered them. I can see them arguing. I listened to, while in a minibus, a young lady talking about African clothes that are that she is selling and stuff like that. And I'll tell you, before, one of the things when we were heading for the first emancipation, most African people were saying, black people ain't gonna wear African clothes. They're not gonna wear African clothes. And today, we're seeing our young people walking casually in the streets with the African head ties and stuff like that. And we have done work. Regardless of whether we are acclaimed faith while we live, we will be acclaimed faith, because somebody's going to ask the question, when did we start doing this?
What does emancipation, since you mentioned emancipation there, what does it mean to you, and what do you think it should mean to the African Ghanaians collective?
Emancipation is pivotal, because emancipation demonstrated that African people who were living in villages that were plantation, no, not villages, take that back. They were living on plantations, would walk to Georgetown to sell on the Sunday market. And as a result of that, save their money. Their main market was the ships, because at that point the ships did not had, there was no refrigeration. So the ships needed fresh goods, limes, oranges, lemons, chickens, eggs, and stuff like that. And they would save that money. And so that when emancipation came, they were able to buy plantations that had gone turned turtle because of a change of policy towards the purchasing of rice, of sugar in England. England had declared, England was going now into a new era, and they needed subjects and not slaves. So they were going into the era of the industrial era, where they would be producing lots of stuff to sell. And emancipation brought that. The immediate post-emancipation, in what the jobs that Africans and the services that Africans provided, that the free people provided in the towns of Georgetown and New Amsterdam is essential to capture in memory and to understand that this industry, this business industry, that the myth is that Africans don't do good in business. Yes, they do. They piloted it in this country, but it was scheming that undermined them and forced them into the public service. And when they went into public service, they became the first teachers. They became the first in every area. So emancipation also is a landmark for retrospect, because when we were slaves, we understood what we were. If you go into the archives, you would see in the newspapers, they would say, oh, there's a slave pretending to be free, and he looks like this and he looks like that. And then you would be surprised and see that the slaves were of various types, and that they did escape from the plantation and come to town and seek jobs as free people. The other area is post-emancipation produced a peculiar character. It produced the colonial. The colonial was an imposition of the British class category into and it did not serve us well. It is the very ethos of our political being began with grassroots people in Charlestown, etc.
Just to bring you back to emancipation, the first time that ACDA started to do emancipation, what are your early memories of that? Anything stand out to you?
Well, I'll tell you what stood out. The second emancipation, the second time we did emancipation, brought into focus an importation of African, well, it was not real African cloth, but African prints. I could remember every store had, and they didn't have enough. There were African prints that when they made the first kaftan and you washed it, everything washed out. But it demonstrated that there was a recognition that this thing that ACDA did here is here to stay. So the commercial people got onto it. Then we had requests for turbans, who can tie head ties, and there were a whole set of movement. So that was like pivotal, that transformation, that awareness, while we were tasked with defining how we're going to celebrate the special village, how we're going to celebrate other things, there was that movement. And that is remarkable.
Thank you. Is there any stories or memories of being a part of ACDA that stands out? Special memory?
Yes, I was surprised when we were tasked with, okay, anything happened socially, especially with our people, grassroots people. ACDA became the first place they stood. And I think that didn't work very well for us with the political people, because we were doing their work for them and they were not very comfortable with it. And I can tell you what stands out pivotally and in a very profound way: the killing of young Jermaine Wilkinson. And ACDA's part in organizing the justice for Jermaine in the era of extrajudicial killings. And when I went to, it began to a part when I decided I'm going to go to Mr. Hoyt. Up to then, they had seemed fossilized, not knowing how to deal with it. And when I got there, I sat down and I told him, we want you to come into Albaistown. And there were several men around him who started, no, you can't go there. That is Hamilton Green's area. Up to that time, Hamilton Green had not visited us. And I was like, what is going on? The political thing had taken had been transferred into a dimension of its own. And Desmond Hoyt looked at me and turned to Ronald Austin and said, Ronald, what do you think I should do? And Ronald said, I think you should. He was the only man who was silent. I think you should go with Barry. And Mr. Hoyt asked me how you came. I said, I came with my motorcycle. He said, will you take us? And I took them to Albaistown. And
so that's one of your earliest memory that you think was profound.
That was a profound memory. It was not the earliest memory, but it was a profound memory in that of a divide, of a fragmentation between the political hierarchy and the people. And I've seen other parties jump on that wagon in respect to stuff, but also when we made the recommendations to the joint service, I can't remember what it was called, but we had to make some recommendations to joint service changes because it had become important, because what had happened is that was not being taken into consideration. The drug business had produced a nouveau riche of businesses who were recruiting policemen. And we came into that, we became entrapped in that, and we had to find our way. And we had to do what we had to do.
So even emancipation, as we're moving towards emancipation right now, what are your words for that? During COVID, you know,
Emancipation has to be celebrated. It is, remember I had coined a name for it, the genesis of modern Guyana?
Yes.
It is the genesis of modern Guyana.
That's a good point to stop. Emancipation is the genesis.
It is the genesis of modern. After emancipation, all else fell in place.
My name is Clementine Marshall, but better known as Sister Marshall. I'm a member of ACDA Steering Committee, and I've been so for most of my life in ACDA.
What prompted you, Sister Marshall, to join or become a part of ACDA? What motivated you to become a part of it?
I don't think I was, to be honest, the first thing I wanted to do was to have something to do, somewhere to go, somewhere positive to go. As I used to be trading and traveling a lot, and after I stopped that, I was at home. And I had time to look at the television, and that was mostly Channel 9 in those days. And I saw this ad, this person saying, oh, there is this new organization. The name of it is the African Culture and Development Association. And we encourage you to come know your history and know about yourself and, you know, and your culture and things like that. And I turned to my husband and children at that time and I said, this is something I think I want to be a part of. There was a number on the phone number, so the next day I called the number. And the person said, oh, I'm Sister Marshall. How can I help you? And I said, well, my name is Marshall too. Are we relatives? They said, no, but I'm a member of ACDA. And I said, I would like to be a part of ACDA. And she said, okay, come on Wednesday evening at 5:30. And that is where, and that was in August in 1993. And I'm here since then.
What are your early memories? Your early memories of that?
My early memories. Getting into, coming through King Street, and then you will see 2 or 3 persons come in and they say, I'm going to ACDA, so I'm going the same place. And you know, after a time, there was a group of us that will meet up at the same time on Regent and King Street corner. So we'll get into ACDA together. Sometimes one person will wait on the other person so that we could go into the meeting together. Our meeting place was, I think, a 10 by 10 or a 12 by 12. But we were a happy, happy group. We were so eager to meet and to talk about things African and you know, before I joined ACDA, I was not aware of some of the issues because all at that time you're just thinking about getting work, making money, look after the family. But when I got to ACDA, then I realized these are all the issues that are out there and was eager to be a part of the organization.
Do you think ACDA is important? Do you think ACDA is important to African Ghanaians?
Of course, ACDA is important. I remember when we started ACDA, I told persons about this organization I'm in. And they said, you know, ACDA, then it's African people. I said, but you're an African. And the little that I start to learn from ACDA, I start to tell others about it. We're an African people, you know. And so I think that ACDA is important because it brought a lot of awareness to persons who, like me, you know, was not aware about, you know, what the history and culture is. We know, yes, we are black people, we call ourselves black people, and we know we are 6 races in the country, you know, here and all of that. But the serious thing about our history and what happened to us and where we came from and all of that, I learned in ACDA and also others.
Mr. Marshall, you were busy here with the cultural aspect of fashion. Tell us a little bit about that. A little bit about the culture that is starting after the cultural aspect.
Okay. You know, culture, we think about, as Brother Kuma said, culture is a holistic thing. But I remember in the quarantine again, it never failed to amaze me about the drumming. There's a village called Union Village on the quarantine that I know about drumming. And I'm always fascinated about the drums. I'm fascinated about your identity through clothing, through your wear, through your head wrap. I'm fascinated about that. I'm fascinated also about storytelling, folk songs, telling stories through folk songs. I'm fascinated about that. I'm fascinated about, you know, the rhythm of dancing. and with the drum. These are the things, and I enjoyed in ACDA. The food, I am also fascinated about the food our ancestors used to. Okay, now some of it have been, diverted and being cooked differently. But I try my best to stay as close as possible to the way our ancestors used to cook their food. That is what I like about it, the cultural part. Weddings, the way the African weddings are being, the ceremonies. I'm fascinated about even your naming your children so that you can be recognized. Even if you're behind a door and somebody call your name, you will know that you are, a child of an African descent. So, all in all, the cultural aspect. Another thing, the cultural aspect has to do with the way we bring our children, with the way we teach our children. The way we encourage them, the discipline. Yes, that also has been changed. But we can still teach our children and discipline our children in a way that we don't have to be brutal to them. But the way we could tell them what our parents told us or what we learned from our grandparents. And they listen. So I do love the cultural part of ACDA.
Emancipation, sister. Emancipation, what it means to you.
Emancipation is a time to be happy, a time to look forward for a future that our ancestors fought for, but were not able to enjoy. And now we're here enjoying it, the freedom. Emancipation also is about recognizing what they did. We need memories, we need to remember what they did for us. I always think every time emancipation and I look at those posters and I start to think, what were they thinking at the time? Coffee fighting for us and all these. They did not live, but we are living here to enjoy it. So that means a lot to me. And I know that it means a lot to other persons because of the freedom, that they derive from the struggles of our ancestors.
Any early emancipation stories you want to share with us?
The national park. Brother alluded to getting there, starting to build the tents, the brothers getting together. And then I am with my potter cook up. Sometimes you cook and you're late and they say, my Sister Marshall, we hungry. You're late with this food. And I did that for years, cooking and taking to the national park, making the mobbies and carrying it so that our men folks that are building the tents, are able to get something to eat. Emancipation Day is such a special day for me. The sunrise service in the national park. Oh, that is so good. As a matter of fact, I remember that before emancipation, we were at the Demico house, ushering in emancipation. Those days were, you never get tired. From the morning, you're working and then you're coming out in the evening to be at coffee or at Demico. We started at Demico and then, the next day, you're up at 5 and 4 o'clock in the morning preparing to get, the different foods for Emancipation Day. I would say that COVID is going to finish and we're going to be back in the national park celebrating emancipation.
Do you have any favorite emancipation event that you think teaches something that you do in the National Park that you believe is so important that all African Ghanaians that come into the park should partake in it? You know, anything that, because we do a multitude of things in the park. What do you think is, whatever changes we go through, we should always keep?
Our history boot. Our history boot. I think that our history booth should be one of the first booths that people should be able to visit. Because, you know, when they get off the road, and the first booth, they're going to spend the longest time there, looking through our history. I think that we need to make our history booths bigger, so that so that our visitors will be able to go through our history booth. African history and ACDA's history. Those two, African history booth and ACDA history booth. What did ACDA do? What have ACDA done from its inception? I think those are the two booths. Yes, we have our drumming booth, our music and all of that. But I think educationally our history booth should be something that we should never get rid of.
Brother Barry spoke about the ACDA being involved in the Justice for Jermaine, actually starting that. What other thing do you think ACDA stands out for in this society? Brother Takuma mentioned the shared governance. What other things do you think we stand out for?
We stood out representing grassroots, the vendors. We stood out. We were out on the road when the vendors were being discriminated against, when they were threatened, their livelihood would have been taken away from them. Most of our vendors are people of African descent, most of them. And so and I have been looking at a pattern even until yesterday. When you walk on the pave, now the vendors, you notice vendors are getting less and less because each store is occupying across the pave. So they are putting when you walk in through on the pave, you're in, like you're still in a building. And all of those vendors that used to vend along there have to be looking for somewhere or cannot vend anymore. We represented our vendors. We also represented persons who were discriminated against by the police. You know, we didn't try to get somebody to go in there when we are not allowed to go in the police station just to represent our people. We also helped, we stand out for our penny bank. Our penny bank, because we know that this is the way our ancestors raised money. And if they did it, we also could do it. Our penny bank, I remember as I'm speaking, Sister Bina Johnson, who was one of the persons who were instrumental in forming our penny bank. We started in those days with, I think, $5 or $10 and all of that. And our penny bank has grown. ACDA have done so many things. Our meeting, our street corner meetings, coming on to Emancipation and African History Month. We will go to the street corners and from length and breadth of Guyana. I know we went to Little Africa, way up in the quarantine. We went to Essequibo, Bartica. Emancipation time, we were at Barticle by the Stelling, beating our drums and sending our emancipation messages. New Amsterdam, we're from village to village on the East Coast, you know, about emancipation. We have and ACDA also have built cells of ACDA. Cells of ACDA. We have our ACDA cell, we have it in Mocha.
But I want to talk, I think we're running out of time, and maybe we can do, what is you would think is a theme song for ACDA? Maybe we can end singing that. The theme song that we sing all the time.
A theme song.
That we always sing, I think it's Nation.
Yeah, Nation, because we wanted to bring the message that it doesn't matter if we're from the village, it doesn't matter if we intellectually up or down, it doesn't matter, we are one generation. We are an African people, right? And so, whenever we go anywhere, we sing this song, Nation away a nation, nation away a nation. All we are one generation, nation away a nation. And, and when we sing that song, it brings a togetherness. People become aware that, yes, you feel that unity and that love in the room whenever we sing Nation Away a Nation.
My name is Violet Jean-Baptiste. I'm the Public Relations Officer for ACDA. I'm also one of the founding members of ACDA, and one of the persons that's responsible and main concern is the education and the development aspect of the organization. So because ACDA stands for the African Cultural and Development Association. Development for us in terms means like getting involved in economic activities. Of course, development for us also means education. And those are the two aspects I'm very concerned about and I'm very responsible for. And that's the aspect of ACDA that I'm involved in. The educational aspect and the business development aspect of the organization and of persons within the organization.
Now, Sister Georgette, you said you were a founder member. What motivated you to wanting to be in ACDA at the time? What to bring that organization, to bring your friends together to start an organization?
Actually, they weren't my friends. It wasn't a collection of my friends. I had returned to Guyana, realizing, of course, before I left Guyana, I was a young woman involved and a member of the ASCRIA with Brother UC Kwayana. And when I left Guyana, everywhere you follow me in the world, if you were to follow me, you know, wherever I live, I'm a member of African organizations. So when I came into Guyana, I visited Brother UC because I'd known him through ASCRIA. And I said to Brother UC, is there an organization here similar to ASCRIA that I can be a member of? And he said, none that I can think of, but I'm thinking of starting an organization, and I've just come back from Ghana in June or something. And if you're willing for us to move on this, in a couple of weeks, let's do it. So a few weeks later, he called me, made contact with me, and he set up a meeting. And he invited persons to that meeting, like Brother Takuma, Brother Sassi Omo, Brother Barrington, several persons. But I didn't know any of them. So it wasn't a collection of friends. It was just, they were new. I was new to them and they were new to me. So I basically got involved because I've always being involved in African organizations since ASCRIA. So the ideology was already in place. So when I came to Ghana, I wanted to be a part of a similar African-centered organization. And out of that, ACDA, as Brother Barry puts it, came into being.
Okay, so now that you have the core with which you work, how did you see yourselves functioning within the then Guyana to satisfy the needs for African culture and development?
What I can say right up front, that once when ACDA came on the scene, when we came together and decided, I remember Brother UC saying to us, before we get out there, we met for months to come up with what our objectives are. What should be our objectives? You don't just go out there, you have to have your objective. What our commitment? What's our vision? We spent a lot of months working on that. And the primary purpose is really the restoration of our people so that they can know their traditions, know the culture, and at the same time be positioned in the society in which they live, where their interests will be represented. That's our primary purpose, I would say. History, knowledge of self, and how you actualize that. How do you move forward as a people? And at the same time, how do you get recognition? Because for us in ACDA, we realize Guyana is a multicultural society. And in that society, you have other groups. And these groups they had not gone through the chattel slavery, which was an inhuman experience for 200 years. And they had taken from them their culture, their names, their ethos, their religion. They did not have the same experience. And that's why you would have Barrington Braffett, Joseph Janet Smith, and so on. They hadn't their names taken from them. They hadn't their religion taken from them. So it was important that ACDA, in its beginning, start to work in that whole restoration. How do you restore a people? And you can only restore them by knowledge of self. So the primary objective really is really teaching. Teaching, teach. We shouldn't miss any opportunity to teach. Because as Willie Lynch had said, and Willie Lynch is one of those slave makers who went around plantations from Virginia all over the Caribbean, teaching slave makers how to control slaves, how to make slaves and how to rob them of their identity and how to brainwash them. And he said that the only thing that can correct that is when they start to learn about their history. The history is the key. The history knowledge of self will wipe out clean the brainwashing. And basically, that's what one of ACDA's primary objective is.
So, in other words, you see ACDA then as a forerunner to the entire reparations movement, because the reparations movement talk about repair of the African self. And ACDA was doing that 27 years ago, 28 years ago, which would have been like 15 years before the reparations movement in the Caribbean really took.
You know, I've heard that. I've heard that. But I remember before I came to Guyana, there was talk of reparations. Reparations is not something that just came up 15 years ago. African people have been calling for payment for work done. We have been calling for payment for work done since emancipation. Since emancipation, we have been calling for it. I know in some areas of the world they said you're supposed to get a mule and 40 acres. You know, reparations, it's not really true to say the forerunner. No, we're not the forerunner. I'm simply, reparations have been a conversation, a demand for a long time. Since emancipation, we've been asking for reparations. It's like the Pan-African movement, ASCRIA, ACDA. We're Pan-Africanists. The Pan-African movement has been long before our time. It's just we see it in ACDA as a relay. We have to, it's like a relay. You pass the baton, you pass it on. So some people, it's like the Olympic torch. You carry that light and you pass it and you pass it. So the talk of reparation, the repair, payment for work done, that's just being carried. It's that torch being passing on, and we hope to pass that on to our children and our grandchildren until it reaches fulfillment, because it is fair and it is just.
Yes, sister. So, in view of the work ACDA has been doing towards restoring Black pride, African dignity, African self-emancipation, how do you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you assess the work that you have done and you still have to do?
Well, you asked me about a scale of 1 to 10, the amount of work we have to do and how much we have done. On a scale to 1 to 10, I think we're at a 2. I think we're at a 2. I think we have not, you know, there is so much work to do. I mean, maybe even a 1 we are. You know, there's 9 you have to do. The work is many, but the laborers are few. You know, there's so much work we have to do. One of the things, though, we have to, I think, take credit for, is emancipation. Emancipation. Now it's become a word in the dialect. It's not emancipation, it's not a new word, but it's become a popular parlance. Now you have emancipation hardware sale. You have emancipation, come and get your spa treatment for emancipation. So it's become common parlance, and that is ACDA's work. The first emancipation I remember, I would say in the national park, maybe about 5 or 10% of the persons there wore African clothes. About 4 or 5%. The last emancipation that we had prior to, I would say about 5% did not wear African clothes. So emancipation, so ACDA has really, we have to take credit for that. We have to take credit for awakening and bringing us to that point. But that's not all that. It's that, you know, the clothing and so on. It's just, it's an important part, but that's not, there's much more. In Guyana, for instance, if we want to stay in Guyana, African Guyanese control maybe about 4 or 5% of the economy. Just like when we wore, 5% of us was wearing clothes, right? Wearing African clothing. We want to go to a stage. That's why I say there's much work to be done, where African Guyanese have a larger portion of the economy. The clothing and the trappings that go with that, the names and so on, those are very critical things. But at the same time, we have to also, and that is why in ACDA we have the developmental part of it. So that we as a people, as African Guyanese, can stand tall in a country that we built. Because as Brother Barry often says, and have coined the phrase, emancipation is the genesis of the Guyanese nation. And it's very, very unfair and unjust that hundreds of years after, we still only participate or part of 5% of this economy. That has to be corrected. That has to be repaired. And the reparations movement is one of the movements and one of the vehicles that can be used to repair that situation.
Yes, you say that in terms of our developmental trust, you see that the position that African Guyanese are in this country are very insignificant in terms of our contribution to the economy. And so my question is, how do you see organizations like ACDA and other influential persons in Ghana making a difference in that developmental path so that we can get here as fast as possible to play a greater role in the economic?
Well, you know, the question where you're asking about how African Guyanese can move up quickly, there's no quick fix. I don't see it happening quickly. I think it's going to be a long process, but it starts with government. Government have to recognize it as a role. As a matter of fact, in Canada right now, there is the developmental fund where finance is available for African business development. In other parts of the world, there's that. We need to have that push. For instance, if one has to bid for a contract, if I have to bid for a contract, say to do roads, I have to have road equipment. The African Guyanese is at a disadvantage. They do not have the equipment to build a road. So therefore, they will miss out on road contracts. So there has to be some system that will allow African Guyanese to access the capital or the equipment so that they can bid. If the present system continues, we will always be wallowing on the muddy flats. It is very, very important that government recognizes it and start to put systems in place that will allow the African Guyanese a level playing field. Reparations, as I've said, is one of the means that could be used for that. Reparations, land, contracts, affirmation that we are an African people and that they owe us. We are the builders of this country. We cannot settle to just be the hewers of wood and the drawers of water. You can't just want us to be security guards and maids. It is very, very important that the government, whichever government is in power, that they recognize that there has to be systems and in place that would equalize this situation, economic equalization in the country. That's my view.
So, in terms of emancipation, we started by saying that before we mentioned what was happening, what has happened in terms of the participants and the dresses. What else do you see emancipation has brought to the African Guyanese? The festival, not emancipation, the event that happened. So that started in 1813 and talk about the festival.
I'll tell you something. Emancipation, prior to emancipation, there was something called folk festival. And folk festival used to be held on the first Monday in August. We decided, we were invited when ACDA was formed, we were invited to do the African portion in the folk festival. And a collection of us decided that since that was the only African-centered holiday in the calendar, that that day should be primarily for Africans. Fortunately, at that time, the persons that were having the multicultural folk festival and the government of that day stepped aside and allowed us to take the day. Since it was August, we wanted the holiday must not be the first Monday, but it must be specific to the Emancipation Day. We lobbied and we were successful with that. And then we started the Emancipation Festival, where the idea behind Emancipation Festival, I remember in our planning, we wanted emancipation to be not only centered on Georgetown. We had the vision that on Emancipation Day, we must hear drumming all over the country where Africans live. That's the dream. It still is the vision, that emancipation must be commemorated throughout the country. In Georgetown, we have Emancipation Festival. Now, one of the things that have happened, we have noticed that now you're having other villages. So it's creeping where you have other communities having emancipation. Because that was the vision, where we get together, we commemorate emancipation, and we teach. The main focus is teach. And that's what we use our festival for. Everybody can come to the Emancipation Festival and have something. Those who want to dance, you go the back. Then we have, as soon as you walk into the national park, the Thomas Lands, you have booths, educational booths. So you can learn about yourself, learn about your history, learn about drumming, learn about food, learn about great African empires, learn about great African people. That is important for us. That is teaching. That's what emancipation for us in ACDA is.
Have we been over the years trying to infuse present-day Africa into the Emancipation Festival?
Oh, there is a need, because even in our objectives, in ACDA initial objectives, we are very, very clear. We're dynamic. We're a dynamic, African culture is dynamic, which means it's changing. So you have to keep up. You have to infuse. And ACDA has been, over the years, we have brought into Guyana cultural artists from the continent, because we understand that culture is a dynamic thing. And we believe that the infusion so we can see and learn and grow and so on. So for us, yes, culture is dynamic. It doesn't stand still. And we are a very creative people.
Now, we have the Emancipation Festival for a number of years, and that focuses mainly on the cultural aspect. Do you envisage, as one of the members of the African Cultural Development Association Steering Committee, do you envisage seeing ACDA evolving an economic developmental field or something where African ingenuity can come forward, where we can look at our cottage industries, where we can look at our contributions to science? Because our young people need to see Africans in science and technology.
I believe that the emancipation is more than culture. Our Emancipation Festival is much more than culture. It offers opportunities for persons to come in and show their wear and make money. I mean, there's a whole section. We have about 50, sometimes 100 persons that come in, showcasing businesses, showcase their new ventures, whether it's clothing, whether it's computers, programs, and so on. So I believe that that aspect could be expanded. Oh, for sure. We can expand that into a trade fair. I mean, out of ACDA came the African Business Roundtable. The African Business Roundtable is out of that desire to take the business. We came up with the African Business Roundtable, and the African Business Roundtable put on the Green Fair, where persons that were involved in the green economy can come and show their ware and showcase what we're doing locally. So I think, yes, in answer to your question, I believe yes, we can and we should and we ought to expand the business aspect of the organization, but more than the organization, because I might differ here to many persons in the steering committee of ACDA. I believe in different groups doing different things. I don't think ACDA is the end all and the be all and should be doing everything. I don't believe ACDA should do everything. I think we have to work in conjunction with other groups, in unity with other groups, participate with other groups, and I think as a collective, as an African collective, we'll be unified as a collective. We can do much more. Where those who are strong in culture can do that, those who are strong in economics can do that, those who are strong in technology can do it. So it's not a task for ACDA alone. I don't see it like that. I believe it has to be done as a collective. That's how I see it. I think if we're talking about emancipation, one of the things that I want to state clearly. You asked me about stories of emancipation that stick in my mind. When we first decided to have the Emancipation Festival, we got so much pushback from persons telling us that African Guyanese are not interested in their culture, they're not interested, they wouldn't, it's not going to be a success and so on. But at some level of mind, we must have believed it. We must have. Why do I say we must have believed it? Because our first Emancipation Festival, we had little things before, but the first one we had in the National Park, we set up in the National Park. We printed no tickets. We set up on the rugby field. And about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the African Guyanese came out by their thousands. And we had a brother, Sase Omo, at the gate we had no tickets, and he's trying to make change and so on. And they lined up all along Thomas Lansdowne Road. And it was taking so long, people just pushed the gate down and walked in. So I always say that that's a memory I have, which stood out in my mind. In the end, we had to fix that gate because we must have believed, because we did not print tickets. We had just had brothers. That's at the gate thinking 1 and 2 people will come in. And African Guyanese came out in their thousands, and we weren't able to cope. The next thing that stands out for me for emancipation, and I want this to go on the record, and that is our first emancipation. Remember, we started in a little 10 by 12 or 16 by 12 little room. We didn't have much money. We decided to put on this festival. That's why we were in the rugby field of the National Park. A brother from Canada have all the footage, and maybe one day we will show it. It was not such a a grand affair, but we were there. And we had no money, we had to get wood and so on. And Brother Barrington Braffett, he said, listen, I have a motorcycle and I will sell it or part it so we could have money for the festival. We had a sister Abina. She was a head teacher at a school at Allen's High School on Regent Street, 3rd Street Agricola, the late Abina Johnson. She's the person that conceptualized the penny bank that we still have going over 20-something years in ACDA. That's a brainchild of Sister Abina Johnson. Sister Abina said, Sister, I am going to borrow some money on my house so that we could have the festival. Those are the things that stand out for me when I think of ACDA Emancipation and its membership. The widow might, the might of widows, poor grassroots Guyanese, saying, this is important, this is something we want to do. That stood out. What also stood out is our teaching, having our learning centers in Agricola, All Boys Town, Sophia, the Bay, and these areas where we would go and teach our children, teach our culture. Rain or shine, mud or no mud, fall in the mud, get up, go. Those are the things that stand out for me. And up to this day, we still have our classes, we still teach our young people, we still have our youth groups. Those are the things that stand out for me. So for me, once we continue doing what we do, building collectives, building unity, teaching our culture, teaching our history, thinking and building the Black economy, I think we will be on the right path as we go forward. Thank you.